So John, I think that I can say straight away that unlike Mr. Alden, there was really never any doubt about what you were going to do, was with the background you came from.
No, I suppose I always had to be an actor. I didn't want to be when I was a young boy. I wanted to be a designer. But I wanted to be in the theatre. I think I really wanted to be a director because I liked the scenery and the lights and the music and getting everything together.
Yes.
And the feeling that perhaps one day I could help actors to work together, which has been one of my great pleasures.
Yes. What about acting, though? When did you first, in fact, tread the boards?
I walked on at the Old Vic in 1921 when I was a student at Lady Benson's school. And I wasn't even paid anything for doing it. I carried a spear in 2 or 3 plays and giggled a good deal in the wrong places. But I do remember years ago when I was in my prep school being isolated because I had mumps or some infectious disease and walking up and down the steps of a terrace in the garden with a rug draped round me, thinking I was a king or a monarch of some kind. And I suppose this was my first sneaking desire to act. There wasn't anybody looking, fortunately, or they'd have had a fit.
Well, you, in any way, though, I suppose people looking at your pedigree would say, as I said, it's inevitable you should become an actor. But I suppose it could work the other way around, coming from such a famous family. You might become almost oppressed by the multi-talents.
I think perhaps I was rather lucky because it skipped a generation a little bit. My parents were not actors at all. And although my mother's mother was an actress, and all my aunts and uncles were actors and actresses, I wasn't a direct descendant of an acting family. I mean, I wasn't direct, my parents were not.
No,
actors.
But you were surrounded by it, weren't you? I mean, it was
yes, but I had 2 brothers and a sister, and we all were very fond of the theatre and acted together and had toy theatres and went to all the plays we possibly could when we were young. And there wasn't really certain which of us would take to it as a profession. And it certainly wasn't mentioned. My father didn't really approve of it very much. And when I said I wanted to be an actor, they said, well, you better work at architecture if you want to be a designer. And I said, no, let me not go to university, because I was just by way of going up to Oxford. Let me go on the stage for 3 or 4 years, and if I don't make a success of it, then I'll go into an architect's office. And I got enough jobs in that short time to get a start. But I was a terribly bad actor at that time. I don't quite know what encouraged people to go on employing me, because I was self-conscious and very inept, and everybody laughed at me, and several actors in companies told me I better not do it.
Why? Why did they laugh at you?
Oh, because I was so bad and I walked so badly, and I was rather pleased with myself, and I don't think I knew anything about it. I just thought it was a kind of exhibition business, and it took me a long time to discover that you had to really reveal something of yourself. I wanted to put on something, you know, to play a part, to be kings and queens and all that. And I suppose that anybody can get up and perform. We all have a streak of exhibitionism in our nature, and one is mixed in being ashamed of it and delighted with it. Of course, you like, you know, coming into the room and everybody laughing at you or saying you're clever or something. And I used to draw pictures and take them down and play the piano by ear a bit, and I was a bit of a show-off. And then I met Noel Coward at a party and thought he was a terrible show-off. Before he was a success. And sure enough, and it was very ironic, because then he became an enormous success in the 20s, and the first real chances I had were to follow him and understudy him in 2 plays and take over his parts. And by that time, he'd become a skilled and brilliant actor, and I was still a great show-off.
You weren't very enamoured of Mr. Coward the first time you met him, were you?
Not that time, no. He was with a girl called Betty Chester, who he was acting with, who was in the Co-Optimists afterwards. And he came into some tea party or cocktail party and rushed to the piano and performed. And I thought he was awfully conceited, but probably because he was taking the limelight away from what I thought I ought to have at that early age. But after that, we became great friends, and I learned an awful lot from him.
So John, everybody's, it's a corny question, but it always normally gets a very good answer from somebody. Everybody's got a Sir Noel anecdote, everybody's got a Coward anecdote. You must have a fund of them, but I mean, what's your favourite one?
Well, somebody asked me, who's writing a book about his witticisms, and I couldn't remember any repeatable ones, because they were all very, very funny, but not quite for the general public. But there is a very marvellous story about the coronation, when we were all sitting in the rain watching the procession. It was a terribly cold day. We all had rugs round our knees, and most of the carriages were closed. Churchill came by, and all we could see was his feathered hat being waved out of the window, and everybody was getting rather disappointed. And then in an open carriage came the Queen of Tonga, who was a magnificent-looking dusky lady in a green turban and a great green sari, And she had an enormous success with the crowd because the rain was pelting down. And everybody was delighted to see her, and she got an enormous reception. But sitting next to her in the carriage was a very small man dressed in black. And somebody said to Noel Coward, "Who is that little man sitting next to the Queen of Tonga, do you think?" And Noel said, "Her lunch."
I think, to be fair, Sir John, we all also to mention that there are quite a few funny quotes have gone down to being attributed to you in your lifetime in the theatre.
Well, I have a great reputation as a brick dropper.
Yes, yes.
And I make terrible gaffes, and people forgive me because they know I don't mean to be malicious. But sometimes they do sound very bad. And apart from that, I get stories attributed to me because of this, which aren't mine at all.
Can I just check one with you, which struck me as being particularly funny? I don't know if it's true or not. You were apparently with a writer called Eddie Knobloch.
Yes.
And you were lunching with him, and you said, "He's terribly boring, but not half as boring as Eddie Knobloch." Mr. Knobloch must have been a little bit sort of...
We looked at each other and we pretended we hadn't heard. I also once said to Miss Attlee, when Clement Attlee was Prime Minister, I met him and his daughter at a dinner party in Stratford-on-Avon after a play. And I was trying rather gaily to say that I so enjoyed living in Westminster because it was so near the theatres. And I said, "Where do you live in London?" She said, "Number 10 Downing Street." It sort of didn't occur to me she might live there too.
Now, let's say this new book of yours, which is out at the end of this month, Distinguished Company, which you described to me earlier as being a trifle, but is full of these sort of fascinating and funny anecdotes of your life in the theatre. Could I ask you, Sir John, it's a difficult question, I know, but who was when you look back and scan the pages of this book, who was the most extraordinary woman that you met, actress that you met in
I suppose Mrs. Patrick Campbell, because I happened to make great friends with her in her decline when she hadn't many friends, and she'd offended so many people, and she took a fancy to me, and so we became very friendly, and I took her around a good deal in New York and quite a lot in London, and I actually acted with her once, which was quite a painful experience.
Why?
Well, you can see in the book why.
But tell me, because...
Well, because I played Oswald in Ghosts, and she was so helpful at the rehearsals, and then she paralyzed me. She told me at the rehearsals that in the great moment when Oswald says to his mother, "The disease from which I am suffering is seated here," and she said, "You must say that in a Channel steamer voice. Pinero told me how to do it, and I've never forgotten it, just as if you're going to be sick." So I was very impressed, and I tried and worked away at all the rehearsals very hard to get this tone in my voice. And when I was just coming to the line, I said, "Mother, the disease I'm suffering from is seated here." And she turned her back to the audience and said, "Oh, I'm so hungry." Completely.
There's a lot of this happen on stage, Sir John, of actors.
Well, I think in the old days there were a great many. I mean, Du Maurier was always supposed to play tricks with clockwork mice behind the milk jug, and people used to put cushions that made unseemly noises when you sat on them, and all kinds of practical jokes. And Tree, who was his manager in his own theatre, is supposed to have nailed all the goblets to the table in Henry VIII. And when everybody said a health to the king, they couldn't move them at all. And also, Glenbow short-term, his father went round to see Tree during an interval at the School for Scandal, when Tree always received all his friends in the intervals, which were very long. And finally, he stayed rather a long time, and they kept on calling Tree. And so Mr. Barnshaw said, "I really must go now." And Tree said, "Oh, let me take you downstairs." Took him down to the side of the stage, opened a door, and he found himself on the stage in the middle of a scene that was going on, Tree roaring with laughter, the audience screaming with joy. I mean, you can't imagine that happening today. They just couldn't resist playing the fool.
Yes, yes. What was the Mrs. Patrick Campbell thing, the worst thing that ever happened to you on stage, Sir John? Or was it...
Lots of things. I had a terrible moment once in the Vortex. We were playing in a theatre called The Little, which was very tiny in St. John Street, which had a perfectly flat auditorium, I'm glad to say. And I dislike cats very much. And in the last big scene with Lillian Braithwaite, when the son is haranguing his mother and taking dope, and it's a tremendous melodramatic scene, a cat came onto the stage. Of course, the audience screamed with laughter. And Lillian Braithwaite, keeping in the place, said, "Oh, Nicky, for God's sake, put that cat out of the room." So I took it up very gingerly, because I hated it, and threw it out of the window. It immediately came in again at the door, on which I was so distracted and despairing that I threw it into the audience. Fortunately, it was a flat stage, and I don't know what the front row thought or where it landed. We never saw it again. It was really rather desperate. That's one of the worst I ever remember.
What about your fellow actors that you mentioned in this book, you worked with A. Matthews, didn't you?
Oh, he was a wonderful
He
old
must
man.
have been a trial to work with, though.
Well, I never acted in a play with him. I directed him once in a play. And he didn't learn much of the lines, but he had an extraordinary way of improvising. And he went to America in the play, so I never really saw him play it. We worked just for a few weeks here in London. But he was such an enchanting man. And I think when he was a young man, he was very accurate and all that. But he went on acting till he was over 90.
Yes.
And he was a great personality, apart from being and people wrote parts with just the parts for A. Matthews, and he did the same thing in almost every play in the last years of his life. And the danger, I think, with the Edwardian actors were that, however versatile they were, they didn't really extend their scope very largely, because they knew the public liked them best in the things that they'd always done, and they were very chary of losing sympathy or losing a public. They say about Du Maurier that in Dear Brutus he wanted to wear a beard in the second act, when he was the artist in the wood. And the company was so horrified that he would change his appearance that they begged him to take it off, and he did. Yes. Which is extraordinary to us now to think of. Yes. But they were people didn't like actors hiding behind, unless they were Coquelin or some Tree was a great master of makeup, I believe. I never saw him, but they loved to see him in disguises. But people either had to be tremendously disguised or very much au naturel. And now, of course, we hardly wear makeup and we go on as ourselves. And I've been so amused to find that, and Olivier's always told me this too, that it's so strange after all our wild experiments with mascara and putty and wigs and beards in our youth, we now have reached, in old age, perfectly straight makeups, or perhaps no makeup at all, and we just go on the stage like ordinary people and behave as much as we can like ordinary people, whereas actors were sort of great declamatory monsters, or else wonderful society dudes.
Carried their style with them wherever they went, didn't they?
I mean, men like Hawtrey, who didn't often wear a costume or anything, but he was so grand and gentlemanly, like somebody in a club. He wasn't really like he wasn't at all fur coat and top hat. But of course Irving must have been a marvellous personality. I would have given anything to have known him. And that time when, he would walk down from Grafton Street in his top hat and fur coat, and everybody took their hats off to him, and he just acknowledged it and walked into his theatre. It must have been very terrific.
Yes. So John, you created the youngest and possibly the definitive Hamlet of this century. What is it, you think, about the role that enabled you to do it?
Well, I think I was so lucky that I was almost the first young actor to be allowed to play the role. You see, in the old days it was always played by the successful star. The actor-manager put it on when he had his own theatre. His wife usually played Ophelia, for the better or for worse. And Forbes Robertson and Martin Harvey and Irving had all played this great part. Tree played it without success. And then it wasn't played for a good many years in the West End. And when I went to the Old Vic, which was a kind of experiment, I had the good luck to get good notices, and Maurice Brown, who'd made a fortune out of Journey's End, moved it to the West End. And when I got to the West End, curiously enough, Henry Ainley was playing it at the Haymarket, and Alexander Moissey, the German actor, was playing it next door at the Globe. And we all three competed for about a fortnight.
Really?
And they were all failures.
Really?
Except that when the other two came off, we began to do much better, and then I'd taken another job and couldn't go on. They were rather cross with me. But it was curious, because now in this last year there have been also a great rash of Hamlets. There have been 4 or 5 people playing it. But it is a play that everybody wants to play sometime in their career. And I think that what was most interesting was that John Barrymore, who was a marvellous Hamlet, who I admired enormously, came here from America in 1926, having studied with a Mrs. Carrington, who taught him to speak English very beautifully and lose his American accent. And he played it with an English company at the Haymarket and ran, I think, for 13 weeks when it had only been announced for about 9 or 10. And that was the first time since the First War, after 1914, that there'd been a successful Hamlet. And it really started the managers thinking that perhaps there was money or some success in a Shakespearean revival, though they'd been completely out of fashion for many, many years.
Yes. I remember talking to Peter O'Toole once, and he said that he would never do Hamlet again because he thought it was absolutely unplayable. He'd come to that conclusion. I won't ask for your comments on that. But what he did say, actually, was rather interesting, was that he had an extraordinary experience one night when he was doing the To Be or Not to Be scene, when the audience started laughing, and he suddenly realised he'd gone on stage with his glasses on. And I wondered if anything like similarly happened to you in serious moments on stage when...
No, I don't really remember very many, except the first night of Othello when my beard fell off in the middle of a passionate scene, and I also leant against a pillar and it promptly fell over. That was a very disastrous night altogether. But God was not with me that night at all.
Can I talk to you a bit about your work as a director, Sir John? It occurs to me that with the massive reputation that you have, that possibly, I don't know if you detect this, that some of the young actors and actresses particularly that you work with might be in awe of you. Do you sense this?
Yes, I make people frightened I don't want to frighten, and I can't frighten the ones I want to frighten, which is rather a drawback. But no, I get on very well with actors, and I don't think on the whole they're very frightened of me. I have a very good fellowship with them, and particularly with all the sort of crew, you know, and the designers and the musicians. That's what I really so enjoy, working with bringing a thing to life with a number of people who seem to trust you. And I think that I do create a good feeling in the theatre, and that's what I admire so much about Noel Coward. And I am so regret that he went away from directing, because when he came into a theatre, the moment he stepped into the stage door, everybody was ready to work for him and were, you know, open to do the job marvelously, and he had that influence.
It might seem a silly question, but I don't know, do you go to the theatre nowadays?
I don't go as often as I used to. I go to the movies more. But I do go to the theatre. Of course, I try and see what's going on. I'm rather alarmed by some of the avant-garde stuff. Not so much because it's so modern, but particularly the classics. Because I do find that there's not enough attention paid to the actual speaking of the lines, and that they're so busy interpreting the play in the director's way that you don't get the play. And to expect actors to act in another period, as well as playing Shakespeare's lines, to play Much Ado About Nothing, which is all about sex and fun, in a Victorian costume, which has been done 3 or 4 times, and the critics have all hailed it, with the parasols and crinolines and strapped trousers. It makes absolute rubbish of the whole play, because the whole manner of the Victorian period is against everything that Shakespeare writes about. And it seems to me that you're asking the actors to do 2 completely different things at the same time, and it's very hard for them. And then the audience is very ready to accept it, and they do. But I think they get a bit bewildered. I'd love to know what young people who've only seen Shakespeare done in what I call travesty really make of the plays that they've seen. Yes. I mean, occasionally, like Peter Brook's Midsummer Night's Dream, it's a brilliant success. It comes off absolutely, because he's given an absolutely new approach, and he's carried it and executed it with perfect taste and marvelous skill and tremendous invention, and I was bowled over by it. But it isn't very often. I mean, an awful lot of people have tried to copy that kind of thing, and then I think that they ruin the plays and make the actor's task twice as difficult. It's difficult enough to act a Shakespeare part as it's written, but to play it in another period, in another setting, it makes it 3 times as difficult, it seems to me.
You mentioned there, Sir John, that you in fact go to the cinema rather more than you go to the theatre. Do you really enjoy the cinema?
Well, I can go out, of course, if I don't like it. And in the theatre, it's very difficult to go out because people know you're in front, and it's very discourteous to your fellow colleagues, and somebody always notices that you're there, or you have to go round and be insincere if you haven't enjoyed it. I don't like to go unless I feel I will enjoy it. In the movies, I pretty well know from the rough, I don't read the notices in detail, but I have a feeling of the people I want to see in the movies, or the directors whose work I want to see, and I go all the time in the afternoons, and I can... the only thing that maddens me is they never tell you the right time, and you always have to sit through a lot of rubbish before the big picture comes on.
But you've done films as well as of course, acted on stage. John, what is the difference between a film?
Oh, it's terribly boring, film acting.
Is it? You found it?
Terribly difficult and terribly boring, and the waste of time is ghastly, and the trickery, and yet you learn a terrible lot. It's awfully interesting when you've been for many years in the theatre to have to learn the medium of television or recording or movies, because it's another kind of demand made on you, and you have to be just as ready as in the theatre. I mean, just as it's maddening in the theatre to do a part 8 times a week, and the curtain goes up exactly at that moment every night, and you could play Hamlet tomorrow, but you can't play it today. That's terrible. But it's even more terrible to be sitting for 4 hours in a caravan in the middle of Turkey, and then suddenly you go on the set on a horse which has to be led to a mark and doesn't want to go to the mark, and then the scene is spoiled, and then you make a mistake in your lines, and you do it again, and you make another mistake, and it's done again and again and again until you're sick of the lines. Then you have to dub it afterwards in some terrible studio because it didn't quite come through rightly, and then all this trickery, and then suddenly they say, "Oh, what do that scene?" And you say, "I haven't studied it, it wasn't done today." "Oh, do it quickly, go on," they said to me. "Oh, this is very important, it's your last scene in the play when you're dead or something terrible's happened. Just go and do it, you know." And you have to be ready suddenly to turn it on at a moment's notice and really be rather good for about 4 minutes without proper rehearsal or preparation, whereas in the theatre it's proper time to rehearse, proper time, dress rehearsals, and the audience to help you, and there is order and discipline. And I always remember years ago when I was making a film called The Secret Agent with Hitchcock at Hammersmith, and I used to go back very, very, very tired to the theatre and have half an hour's rest before Romeo and Juliet, I was playing at that time with Olivier and Peggy Ashcroft and Edith Evans. And it was wonderful to come back to the order of the theatre and to know the curtain would go up and would come down at the right time, and everything would go through, and when your weights were, and when you had to be emotional, when you had to be less tired, so on and so on. But after the movies, the time one had spent all day wasting, sitting about and waiting and being powdered for a shot and all that, it was such a relief to have the order of the theatre. But it's two different kinds of discipline, and both of them are very arduous.
Yes. I talked to Dame Edith Evans recently, Sir John, and she said an interesting thing that fascinated me about somebody who's been on stage for a long time. She said that she could positively sniff an audience in the...
Yes, you mustn't tell her so. She's one of the most amusing people in that way, because if you say, oh, it's a marvellous house tonight, she looks through you as if she'd shoot you. Or if it's a bad house, she won't have it either. I think she has an iron discipline, and she really, her great, marvellous gift is that she doesn't milk anything in the theatre. She chooses one moment in a play or one moment in a scene which she wishes the audience suddenly to see her heart. And I always say she opens the window and you see right in, and then she almost slams it shut before you have time to take it in or be bored or be... You don't know how she's done it, and it's gone.
Yes.
And that is wonderful. It's like seeing a beautiful piece of light or something.
Yes.
And she has this gift of repose and her voice goes in these wonderful arcs. Oh, she's a most wonderful artist.
Have you ever turned down a part, Sir John, because you didn't understand it?
Yes, I turned down Edward Bond's Lear the other day because I really couldn't bear it. I read it 3 or 4 times. And I said I couldn't bear to rehearse this play or act it or go to see it, and I didn't. But it's, I'm sure it's a powerful piece of work, and I did sort of admire it in a way. Yes. And the same with Beckett's Endgame, which they all wanted me to play, and I just couldn't bear it. The pessimism of it depressed me so much. Yes. But I think if I had played it, I might have learned a lot more about Beckett, who I've never really been able to appreciate. Yes.